You were never the problem. The problem was her believing you were disposable. And that's the cruelest aspect of human nature, the tendency to underestimate what is too readily available, too predictable, too needy. Make no mistake, it wasn't a lack of love, it was an excess of presence. Too much access, too much reaction, too much explanation. You became her emotional mirror, and mirrors don't cause regret, they cause comfort, and nobody regrets what's still within reach. But there's a turning point, an invisible line that, when crossed, changes everything. When she realizes you're no longer affected by the crumbs she used to drop. When her networks no longer reveal neediness, but progress. When her absence isn't a game, but a cold reality. The universe where she's no longer the star, she's just a memory. The psychologist Carl Jung said that what you resist persists, but what you wisely ignore desperately seeks to be noticed. There's a silent pain that sprouts when the other person doesn't react as the emotional script expected. And this pain is the first step towards regret. It's the crack that opens space for doubt. Did I lose someone whose value I only now realize? And this doubt, when cultivated with strategic coldness, becomes an obsession. This video isn't a revenge manual. It's a revelation about social and psycho-emotional dynamics that most men ignore, until it's too late. It's not about winning her back. It's about understanding what triggers the true weight of loss in someone who swore you were easily replaceable. When you understand that, you stop chasing. You start being chased. She didn't leave you because you were bad. She left you because you seemed easy to forget. There's a fatal mistake men make when they're dumped. They think winning her back is all about words, when in reality, regret only blossoms in the void. But this void isn't created out of thin air. It only settles in after the sense of replaceability is shattered. And that's the trap almost all men fall into, allowing her to believe that, by leaving your life, she's risking absolutely nothing. On the contrary, she's gaining autonomy, power, freedom, and the cowardly certainty that, if she ever wants to come back, you'll still be waiting. This is the illusion of insignificance. A silent psychological trick that forms when a man, for fear of losing her, decides never to confront her. Never to value himself, never to say enough. The fear of losing her makes you accept little, offer too much, and without realizing it, begin to validate her every behavior, even those that disrespect your presence. And what does this generate? An emotional system where she is the prize and you are the pedestal. Where she is the source and you are the cup. Where she is the fire and you are begging to be burned. In practice, this means she begins to see herself as someone of superior value. And that's the beginning of contempt. Because the more she feels in control of the situation, the more she tests the limits. And the more you allow it, the more she internalizes the idea that you are there for lack of options. The man who can't live without me is the most powerful ego fantasy a woman can nurture. And you, by becoming predictable, respond exactly to what she unconsciously expected. Emotional submission. Notice the signs. She responds less, takes longer, withdraws and returns when she wants, imposes silence when she desires emotional punishment. And what do? You try to talk, try to resolve things, try to be rational with someone who is already operating at the emotional level of domination. You offer explanations, dinners, flowers, proof. But all this only reinforces one message: I am easily manipulated. This is where one of the most perverse human dynamics comes in. The overvaluation of what is absent and the devaluation of what remains too long. Cleopatra, Napoleon, Casanova, historical figures who mastered the art of alternating presence and absence to create value. They knew that seduction lies not in excessive giving, but in building scarcity. You don't feel breathless when you breathe normally. You feel breathless when it is taken from you. And what many men don't realize is that, by being too available, they become emotionally disposable. Evolutionary psychology explains this with the concept of perceived reproductive value. It's not just about beauty or status, it's about behavior. A man who acts as if he has no other options biologically communicates to me that he is of low value, that he needs to compensate for what is lacking with insistence. Therefore, desperation drives her away. The hasty attempt at reconquest devalues her. And most seriously, hasty forgiveness confirms her disinterest. But all of this happens because of an invisible addiction, the addiction to female validation. Many men build their identity based on being approved by a woman. And that's fatal, because when she realizes this, she feels like the sun, and you like a planet revolving around her. This might inflate her ego at first, but over time, it breeds boredom. And boredom is the antechamber to contempt. This is where the brutal logic comes in. She will only truly value you when she realizes she's no longer the center of your universe. And that doesn't happen with words. It happens with actions, and especially with absence. But before that, you need to eliminate the poison of neediness. And to do that, you need to understand that you weren't the problem. The problem was how you positioned yourself. It's possible you gave her more than she deserved, that you made too many plans for someone who didn't even know if she wanted to stay, that you overlooked signs of selfishness, narcissism, or simple disinterest. And why? Because you were stuck on the idea of keeping, at any cost, someone who represented an emotional fantasy. The idealized woman. The salvation from your emptiness. The mistake wasn't loving her. The mistake was abandoning yourself to try and keep her. And when that happens, she sees you as a man who doesn't love himself enough to set boundaries. And nobody regrets losing someone who accepts everything. Have you ever missed someone who begged to be chosen? Probably not. Because the absence of self-respect destroys any eroticism, any magnetism, any mystique. And without that, desire dies. And where desire dies, regret doesn't arise. The greatest irony is that often, she only realizes your true value when you've already rebuilt your life without her. Because at that moment, the contrast is brutal. The insecure and needy man she left behind no longer exists. In his place, there is someone with their own brilliance, with options, with presence. And then, her brain goes into shock. Did I lose the only man who truly saw me and yet still had the potential to be desired by others? This is the point that shatters the illusion of replacement, because she realizes that what seemed common was extraordinary. That the one who was too available was only emotionally involved, and that now, by becoming scarce, he becomes irreplaceable. It is at this moment that genuine regret is born. But it only happens to those who had the courage to leave their emotional comfort zone. That's why the first step isn't to make her miss you. It's to rediscover your own worth. Not as a strategy to get her, but as liberation from your emotional dependence. Because when you stop trying to prove you're enough and start becoming someone who naturally radiates value, she will feel it. Even if she never says it, even if she never comes back, the impact has already been made. The narrative has already been rewritten. And in the silent theater of her mind, you went from extra to protagonist. Silence is not absence. It is amplified presence. It's when the sound of what is left unsaid echoes louder than any shouted word. And it is precisely in this silence, dry, uncomfortable, and enigmatic, that regret begins to take shape. Because for a woman who is accustomed to your emotional immediacy, your quick reaction, your eternal availability, the true emotional collapse doesn't come when you say it's over. It comes when you simply stop responding to her existence. But be warned, this isn't about giving the famous cold shoulder. It's not about games. It's about a conscious, absolute, and strategic cut. A silence that doesn't intend to provoke, but to rebuild. Because true silence is not passive. It is active. It doesn't wait. It shapes, it doesn't beg to be noticed, it imposes itself through absence. And above all, it completely changes her perception of you. Because when you are silent, you break the emotional script she expected. The human brain hates broken patterns. It seeks consistency, predictability, answers. When you disappear after months or even years of reacting to her every stimulus, what you create is an emotional bug. A glitch in her programming. A gap that needs to be filled. And that's when she starts mentally reviewing everything that happened. Not because she misses you, but because she feels discomfort. Unexpected absence is an attack on the ego. And the ego, when threatened, reacts with doubt. And doubt is the seed of regret. Robert Greene, in The Art of Seduction, teaches that calculated absence increases your value. He explains that constant presence diminishes magnetism. That mystery only holds up when there is distance. And that only what is rare can be intensely desired. This is fundamental, because the man who keeps explaining his absence, trying to show that he is moving on, who posts indirect messages or mature statuses on social media, is not silent. He is in passive-aggressive mode. And that doesn't cause regret, it causes contempt. The real turning point happens when silence is accompanied by progress. When suddenly she realizes you haven't disappeared, you've evolved. Your body language has changed. Your aesthetic is more refined. Your social circle has renewed itself. Your social media, if it still exists, is sober, strategic, with new environments, new people, a new shine. But nothing is about her. There are no traces, no provocations, and this lack of focus on her is what hurts the most, because it shows that the center has shifted. The world that revolved around her no longer recognizes her as the sun. This is the moment when you begin to inhabit her mind as a constant doubt. She tries to understand. Did he really move on? Is he with someone? Has he forgotten me completely? But there is no answer, and the absence of an answer is the worst kind of emotional punishment for someone who fed off your imbalance. She starts checking your social media in secret, asking mutual friends, creating fake profiles, inventing excuses to see you. But you don't react, you don't confirm, you don't explain. And this silence erodes day after day the illusion of control she had. This happens because the silence exposes a brutal reality. She has lost emotional access. And losing access is much more painful than losing the relationship. The relationship can end and a bond can still exist. But when silence settles in firmly and continuously, the bond breaks. And when she realizes that she no longer influences her emotions, her life, her decisions, the ground disappears. Neuroscience reinforces this logic. The brain reacts to silence with interpretive hyperactivity. In other words, the less information she has about you, the more her mind fills in the gaps with assumptions. And the more she assumes, the more emotion she invests. Absence becomes a blank canvas that she tries to paint with memories, speculations, and regrets. This process can last days, weeks, or months. But the impact is inevitable. The figure she previously considered safe, predictable, and emotionally dependent is now an enigma. And the human mind is obsessed with what it doesn't understand. Silence, therefore, becomes the mirror of your reconstruction. But be warned, it only works if you're truly rebuilding yourself. Silence without evolution is self-abandonment. It's escapism. It's no use isolating yourself hoping she'll miss you if you remain the same insecure, fragile man, silently begging for validation. Absence is only magnetic when it's accompanied by presence on another level. When you appear in the world with a new rhythm, a new posture, a new purpose. And that's when the pain begins to reverse. Because before, you were the one carrying the blame. Now, without anywhere to project that guilt, it falls back on the real culprit, her ego. And she starts to doubt everything. What if he never misses me again? What if he's forgotten me for good? What if he's now desired by other women? What if I was, in fact, just a phase and not destiny? These questions don't need to be answered. Silence takes care of that for you. Because when doubt sets in, regret begins to fester. And make no mistake, she might try to turn the tables. Sending subtle messages, liking your old photos, inventing trivial topics just to check your level of receptiveness. These are the tests. And this is where most fail. Because, at the first sign of contact, they go back to responding as before. They go back to giving what she didn't ask for. They go back to validating the illusion of control, and thus, they destroy everything that silence built. That's why emotional discipline is essential. It's important to understand that silence isn't a phase, it's a language. It's the language of your new version. And this new version doesn't respond to just any stimulus. It selects, it observes. It reacts when and if it wants. And this scarcity of response, when well maintained, is what generates obsession. Because what is common becomes predictable, and what is predictable is never valued. Cleopatra, in conquering Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, didn't win them over with promises. She won with mystery, with alternating presence, with emotional intelligence. She knew that being absent at the right moment was more seductive than any anxious presence. And you need to be the Cleopatra of your own story. To use silence as an invisible choreography that reconstructs your narrative in her eyes. A narrative where she no longer has control. This is where the game changes, because when silence begins to provoke more reactions than words ever could, you understand the power you always had, but never used. And when she realizes she can no longer invade your world uninvited, that's when the real despair begins. Because there's nothing more unbearable for someone who once had you in their hands than discovering they're no longer needed. Silence doesn't need to be eternal, but it needs to be absolute while it lasts. Because what it's building isn't just regret, it's building respect. And respect isn't born from confrontation, it's born from the absence of submission. When you disappear without needing to explain, when you progress without needing to show off, when you value yourself without needing to diminish anyone, you become for her a memory that doesn't heal, a void that no distraction fills, an absence that echoes. And that echo is the sound that remains when pride collapses, when she finally realizes she's lost the man she only now learned to respect. Because the silence that once seemed like a punishment now reveals itself as the price of arrogance. She doesn't miss what she lost, she misses what she can no longer reach. And that detail changes everything. Because most men try to be remembered for the version they were. The passionate, available, dedicated, broken version. But that version never provokes deep regret. At most, it provokes shallow longing. The one who generates real regret is the man who is reborn unrecognizable. The man who rebuilds himself to such an extent that he becomes unattainable for the woman who once believed she could control him forever. It is in this transformation that silent revenge resides. But this revenge has no hatred. It has presence, rare presence, selective presence, a presence that arrives in a room and changes the atmosphere. The new you doesn't talk much. But when you do, everyone listens. You don't seek approval. You create your own narrative. And that confuses, intrigues, and above all, deconstructs. Because the new you no longer fits into the emotional memory she had. And when reality doesn't confirm the memory, the mind goes into crisis. This is the most critical point in the process, when she realizes that the man she rejected is not the same man the world admires now. And this realization comes in waves. First, doubt, then discomfort, then comparison, finally, emptiness. Because seeing you transformed, she wonders, was he always like this and I didn't see it? Or did he become this way after me? In both cases, she loses. In the first, for not having seen it. In the second, for having served as a stepping stone for someone who no longer looks back. And how does this new man manifest himself? He doesn't shout independence. He breathes independence. He doesn't chase social validation. He attracts attention because his energy has changed. He doesn't need to force conversations or prove his status. He emanates confidence effortlessly. He lives a life that doesn't require explanations. And from there, she feels it. Because women have an emotional radar. And this radar picks up everything. His lack of neediness, his emotional self-sufficiency, his new circle of friends, his full schedule, his lightness without her. The real transformation doesn't happen in aesthetics, although that helps. It happens in the gaze, in the tone of voice, in the response time, in your new relationship with the world. Because now you don't position yourself as someone seeking love. You are someone who radiates value, and that value begins to be validated by others, other women, other men, other circles. And when the world begins to admire you, she understands that she has lost something that everyone now wants, and regret turns into anguish. Neil Strauss, in The Game, calls this DHV, demonstration of higher value. The point is not to show off, it's to let your lifestyle speak for you. That your new routine demonstrates that your life is now abundant, rich, full of stimuli. And the most powerful thing, she has no access to any of it. Because you don't expose it. You share selectively, and what is shared has a clear subtext. I'm on another level. And that level is no longer yours. And she will test it. She will try to get closer again. You'll comment on old posts, reply to stories, send subtle indirect messages, but you don't react to the new. You're not shaken. Because with the new, you understood something the old never knew. It's not her return that validates your worth. It's your worth that deactivates any attempt at a comeback that doesn't involve real transformation. Because now, she would need to fight for you. But she doesn't know how anymore. This doesn't mean arrogance. It means standards. With the new, you have criteria. You have a long-term vision. You have a strengthened self-image. And above all, you have peace. Peace because you no longer need to prove anything. Because the greatest symbol of emotional power is not being shaken by someone who used to dismantle you. And this calm demeanor, this magnetic stability, is what attracts the most. Because it shows you're not playing games. You've turned the tables. And here comes the hardest lesson. Sometimes she truly understands. She realizes what she's lost. She feels it. She suffers. But even so, she doesn't come back. Not out of pride, but because the abyss between the man she knew and the man you've become is too great. And she doesn't know how to navigate that space. You've become such an elevated, distant version of yourself that she can only observe from afar. And that destroys her more than any rejection. Because what truly corrodes her from the inside isn't being rejected. It's realizing there's no more chance, that there's no more connection, that there's no more password to a universe that was once hers. You've become an enigma. And an enigma is always more fascinating than certainty. She remembers your details, your phrases, your habits, but she no longer recognizes you. And this disconnection is what generates that silent emptiness she'll never verbalize but will always feel. And you? You don't celebrate this pain. You understand, because your transformation wasn't for her to regret. It was for you to never get lost again. The new you knows the price of abandoning yourself to keep someone. And that's why you'll never again bend to fit in. You'll never again accept crumbs, nor mold yourself to feel worthy. You no longer need to be chosen. You have become the choice. Now, you walk with posture, you look with firmness, you speak with clarity, you live with purpose, and all this effortlessly. Because it has become natural. Because it has become you. Because the pain that once broke you has now become armor. And this armor is not to ward off love, it's to filter, it's to protect. It's to remind you that before deserving someone, you need to be deserving of yourself. And at this stage, she may try, but she won't succeed. Because the new you is driven by something she can no longer grasp: integrity. And integrity doesn't return to what once almost killed you inside. Integrity doesn't negotiate principles out of neediness. And above all, integrity isn't interested in nostalgia. The past had its chance, and it wasted it. You're no longer trying to be remembered. You are now impossible to forget. That's the real turning point. It's not about revenge, games, or feeding your ego with crumbs of attention. It's about liberation, about understanding that the true corrosive regret isn't caused by sharp words, but by a sharp silence. Not by desperate absence, but by selective presence. Not by begging for love, but by emanating value. You're no longer the easy option. You're no longer the guaranteed choice. You're no longer the predictable one. And this silent, relentless change was the hardest blow she could receive. Because when a woman realizes she's no longer the center of your life, and worse, that you've become the center of yours, the game changes forever. And the cruelest part, you didn't need to say anything. Your evolution spoke for you. And now if she sees you, she hesitates. If she remembers, she feels. If she dreams, she blames herself. Because the man she once left behind became the man she searches for in everyone but finds in no one. You became the exception. And the exception, by definition, doesn't repeat itself. She lost, but not only you. She lost the chance to participate in her peak. She lost access to the man who only came into being because she left. And that, no mirror can erase. But you don't do this for her. You don't do this to show anything. You do it because you finally understood. You will never again beg to be noticed. You will never again shrink yourself to fit someone's desires. You will never again love someone more than you love yourself. And this self-love, mature, silent, without exhibitionism, is the most sexual, most irresistible, most lethal energy that exists. So now look back, see everything you went through. All the pain, all the doubt, all the emotional humiliation that once tore you apart. And realize that wasn't the end. It was rebirth. It was the necessary fire to mold her sharpest version. The version that no longer seeks, but is sought. That no longer needs to prove, but is proven every day by reality. The version that silenced the cries of neediness to hear her own greatness. She won't forget you, because she doesn't forget a man who broke the script, who silenced where she expected drama. Who evolved where she expected stagnation. Who disappeared, and even absent, became a constant presence in the depths of her mind. And no matter how much time passes, how much she tries to pretend, at some point in her life, in some silence on any given night, your name will echo, and she will close her eyes. Because it will hurt. It will hurt to know that you are no longer there, and that now you will never be again.